In a dramatic escalation that threatens to upend global energy markets, Iran's top joint military command has formally announced the closure of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, framing the move as a direct and forceful response to what Tehran describes as blatant U.S.-Israeli violations of the recently brokered ceasefire memorandum in southern Lebanon. The announcement, carried by the Iranian news agency Mehr, cites America's failure to enforce the very first paragraph of the understanding, a clause that obligates an end to Israeli military raids, and decries the ceaseless and continuous bombardment that has resulted in the merciless killing of hundreds of thousands of oppressed civilians in the region. Notably, Iranian officials employed the future tense in their declaration, stating that the strait will be closed, leaving international observers and oil traders scrambling to interpret whether this constitutes an immediate operational order or a high-stakes ultimatum designed to force Washington's hand within a matter of hours. The ambiguity of that phrasing, as noted by correspondents on the ground, suggests that Tehran is deliberately wielding uncertainty as a weapon, keeping the world guessing while maximizing psychological and economic pressure on the United States to rein in its ally. Diplomatic analysts are already characterizing this as Iran's deployment of its most formidable economic leverage, a tool that has proven far more immediately disruptive than the specter of nuclear proliferation. James Bays, Al Jazeera's diplomatic editor, emphasized that Iran has mastered the art of economic warfare, recalling that former President Donald Trump himself, during a G7 meeting just days prior to signing the memorandum, candidly admitted that the world was teetering on the brink of economic collapse, with a mere 4 weeks' worth of global oil reserves in storage. By threatening to choke the Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 1/5 of the world's petroleum passes, Iran is effectively weaponizing global supply chains to halt the violence in Lebanon, gambling that the economic chaos unleashed by such a blockade would compel the United States to act decisively against Israel. However, the feasibility of that gambit remains deeply uncertain, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly declared that he does not consider himself or his country bound by the terms of the memorandum, and Israeli military operations in southern Lebanon have persisted unabated despite American calls for restraint. The Israeli chain of command, as critics point out, operates with chilling efficiency, and the continued bombardment since the so-called ceasefire took effect underscores a stark reality. Washington's influence over its ally appears to be waning at the very moment Iran is testing its resolve. Complicating the already volatile landscape are deeply conflicting signals regarding potential U.S.-Iran negotiations. In a stark counterpoint to Tehran's belligerence, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News that he believes direct talks between the two nations could commence as early as Sunday, raising the possibility of a dramatic diplomatic breakthrough even as the military announcement threatens to close the strait. Adding to the confusion, some media outlets have speculated about a possible Iranian delegation meeting with American officials, including Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, a claim that Iranian sources have vehemently denied. This contradictory choreography suggests a complex dual-track strategy. While Iran publicly brandishes its military might, it may also be leaving a back-channel door ajar, with Pakistan playing an instrumental mediating role. The Pakistani Interior Minister is currently visiting Tehran, reportedly working to facilitate the negotiations and prevent a complete diplomatic collapse, as Islamabad has consistently pushed for a peaceful resolution and fears the economic contagion that would follow a Hormuz closure. Iran's conditional approach to the negotiating table has become increasingly explicit, with senior officials insisting that any meaningful dialogue with the United States hinges on the tangible implementation of a 5-point framework, the foremost being a comprehensive and verifiable ceasefire across all fronts, including southern Lebanon. Beyond the immediate cessation of hostilities, Tehran is demanding concrete action on the lifting of the American blockade, the alleviation of crippling sanctions, and the unfreezing of billions of dollars in Iranian assets, all provisions that were purportedly embedded within the Memorandum of Understanding, but have yet. The geopolitical landscape has lurched into a state of high-stakes confusion within a matter of hours, as Iran's top military command formally announced the closure of the strategic Strait of Hormuz, while Washington simultaneously insisted that no such blockade has actually taken effect. According to Iran's Tasnim news agency, the Armed Forces, Qadem al-Anbiya, Central Headquarters issued a statement on Saturday, June 20, declaring the strait closed to all vessel traffic as the first step, in response to what Tehran characterizes as blatant breaches of contract and broken promises by the United States and Israel. The directive explicitly attributes the decision to Israel's continued military operations in southern Lebanon, which have caused massive civilian casualties and displaced hundreds of thousands, alongside the failure of American forces to enforce the very first paragraph of the recently signed ceasefire memorandum, which calls for a comprehensive halt to hostilities. However, within minutes of the Iranian announcement, starkly contradictory reports emerged from the United States, deepening the uncertainty gripping global oil markets. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News that American intelligence has detected no evidence of an active Iranian closure, revealing that approximately 16 million barrels of crude oil successfully transited the strait just yesterday. A senior U.S. defense official echoed this assessment, stating that the Pentagon has not observed any tangible military movements by Iranian naval forces that would indicate a physical blockade is currently being implemented. This bizarre disconnect, a formal state pronouncement of closure versus an American denial of its execution, has left shipping companies and energy traders scrambling to assess the real-time risk, as the world's most critical maritime chokepoint hangs in a state of dangerous ambiguity. While Iran brandishes its military leverage, its diplomatic machinery is simultaneously moving in a seemingly contradictory direction. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Baghi confirmed that a high-level delegation is preparing to depart for Switzerland, though he clarified that their purpose is not to immediately negotiate a final peace deal, but rather to demand that the other side fulfill its obligations. Top Iranian negotiators, including Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, are expected to arrive in central Switzerland later, on Saturday evening. This diplomatic push comes after the first round of U.S.-Iran talks, originally scheduled for Friday the 19th, was abruptly postponed due to the intensifying violence in Lebanon. The Iranian stance remains immutable. Tangible progress on a comprehensive ceasefire, specifically halting Israeli raids in the south, must precede any substantive nuclear or sanctions negotiations. In a telling prelude to Saturday's dramatic announcement, Iran had already tightened its grip on maritime traffic just 24 hours earlier. On Friday, the Iranian Ports and Maritime Authority issued new regulations requiring all vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz to submit transit applications a full 48 hours in advance, strictly adhere to designated shipping lanes and scheduled passage times, and note that Tehran would cover security, safety, and environmental service costs for a 60-day window. Maritime intelligence data reveals that, despite the escalating rhetoric, Iran successfully exported roughly 18 million barrels of crude oil over the 5 days leading up to the closure declaration, suggesting that Tehran has been racing to maximize revenues before potentially pulling the trigger on a full-scale blockade. On the ground in Lebanon, the human toll continues to mount despite the nominal ceasefire that took effect on Friday afternoon. Israeli airstrikes on Saturday have killed at least 16 people in southern Lebanon, including 2 children, according to local health authorities, while Lebanon's national news agency reported that a series of drone and jet strikes claimed at least 5 additional lives in separate incidents. These latest fatalities follow Friday's intense and bloody clashes, which left 47 Lebanese dead and claimed the lives of 4 Israeli soldiers. Both sides have vehemently accused the other of violating the fragile truce, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly asserting that his government does not consider itself bound by the full terms of the memorandum, effectively rendering the diplomatic framework hollow. The current crisis is particularly ironic and dangerous, given that the Strait of Hormuz was only reopened a mere 3 days ago, following a provisional U.S.-Iran agreement that had briefly calmed tensions. That 14-point memorandum of understanding, designed to end the broader conflict, has now been rendered almost entirely moot by the failure to implement its foundational clause. Iran has now explicitly linked the fate of the strait, the war in Lebanon, the lifting of the American blockade, the unfreezing of its assets, and the future of nuclear talks into a single, indivisible diplomatic package. As Qatar, Pakistan, and Egypt scramble to mediate, with Pakistan's interior minister currently in Tehran in a last-ditch effort to de-escalate, the international community is left watching with bated breath, with Iran warning that further measures are already planned if their demands are not met, and the United States denying the current closure while failing to stop Israeli operations. The world now faces the grim possibility that this first step could quickly escalate into a full-scale economic blockade, plunging global energy supplies into bedlam. The fuse is lit, and the clock is ticking,